Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, you may have heard me say before that I am not a political expert, a political pundit. I have never even tried to play one on TV, but I do like to listen to and learn from people who are or were in the political game, particularly as elected officials. So I recently sat down with two former Republican elected officials, Chris Saxman, who is a former Virginia State Delegate representing Virginia's 20th District, and Denver Riggleman, who is a former United States Representative for Virginia's 5th Congressional District. And we discussed the state of politics, the state of political parties in the U.S., and we talked about, among other things, the wisdom and viability of a possible third political party. And I know you may be saying, wait, Glenn, no. That's counterproductive. That's not wise. Been there, done that. It's never worked out so well. And I can't disagree with any of that. But, friends, what I would say is, given where we are right now, at this moment in our nation's history, given what politics looks like, given what our federal government looks like, because what it looks like in significant part is, Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and others trying to walk the rule of law deep into the woods and shoot it dead. Given where we are, I think it would be foolish not to talk about, to discuss, to robustly debate the wisdom, the prospect of other approaches that might be able to move us forward toward a more perfect union. So friends, I hope you'll stick with me, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with two former Republican elected officials, Denver Riggleman and Chris Saxman. All right, everybody. Welcome to what we usually call a Justice Matters one-on-one session, but I think today we have to go with two-on-one, although I hope it's not going to be that adversarial. But I am really thrilled to have a couple of friends. One in particular is a very old friend, not because of his age, but because I have known him well in excess of 40 years, because we went to college together. We were fraternity brothers.
Yep.
I don't know if he has more embarrassing stories about me or I have more embarrassing stories about him. I'm guessing it's probably a push. But first of all, let me tell you about my friend Chris Saxman. So Chris is a former Virginia State Delegate from Virginia's 20th District. He served from 2002 to 2010. He co-chaired John McCain's Virginia campaign in 2008. He is a former history teacher. I always have to give huge props to teachers. He also runs a nonprofit, nonpartisan, pro-business organization called Virginia Free. And I think, Sax, you're on Substack now with Virginia Free, yes?
Yeah, I have two Substacks, the Intersection of Chris Saxman, the Substack, and then Virginia Free as well. Yeah, thanks.
Good. So I will post that in the description for this video. We may even have our editor flash it up on the screen during the course of our conversation. So please find Chris Saxman on Substack. Chris, I'm thrilled to have you with me today. Now let me shift over to our other guest.
First rule, Glenn, if you call me Chris one more time, I'm going to come through the screen and slap.
I got to call you Sax?
That's all you know me as.
We called you other things in college, but I'm not going to go there.
That's the only nickname I had. But Denver, I've known Glenn this is 42 years. 42 years.
Man. So you guys met when you were like 5 years old then, right?
Wow. You have to understand.
I don't know how. Dude, you were 3 years behind me, and I just looked at your bio. I'm 5 years older than you. I don't know how that happened.
I was 17 when I got there. I was a freshman. You were a senior. And at Denver, Glenn was an All-American football player at WNL.
I was looking at his pictures in there. He's a pretty sexy guy.
Coach, hey, I will take that all day long. Thank you. All right, and now my new friend, Denver Riggleman. You all undoubtedly know Denver. He was a member of Congress representing Virginia's 5th Congressional District from 2019 to 2021. He is an Air Force veteran. Importantly, he was both an enlisted man, as my pop was, and an officer, as I was. My pop and I were Army, and Denver was Air Force. He's a business owner. He owns one or more, maybe, distilleries down in the Charlottesville, Virginia area. He was a senior technical advisor to the January 6th House Select Committee, and you've probably seen him on all of the cable news networks talking about his work in that regard. He is also on YouTube, Denver After Dark, and he's on Substack as well. And what's your handle on Substack, Denver?
It's just Denver Riggleman, like 752246. I don't know. It just something like that. I don't know, but it's good.
Okay. And I saw a recent campaign ad where you just came out for Abigail Spanberger, who was obviously running for governor of Virginia. So I have with me two politicians and political experts. I am not a political pundit. I am not a political expert. I never played one on TV. If I know anything, I'm a rule of law guy because I spent 30 years prosecuting predominantly murder and RICO cases in the courts of Washington, D.C., and virtually every other kind of criminal case you can imagine. But I'm going to leave it up to the political experts. And what I want to start with, gentlemen, and Sax, I'll start with you. I mean, what is your take on the state of the republic, the state of government, the state of our two-party system? Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for the system that we do have and how well it's handling the current stress test. We have three branches of government. They're designed, I give a lot of credit to the founders these days for designing a government that has separation of powers and checks and balances. And I've had a number of friends throughout the country, and they're texting me and they're frantic. Like, what about this? What about that? Look, the courts are still there. The courts are going to do what they're going to do, and and this president is going to run the chain of all the courts in the appellate process. And he's going to and is pushing the envelope in a lot of these policy areas. But I think overall, when you pull back, we are still a good people. We still have a very large, vibrant economy. We still have very good government up and down. We have 500,000 elected officials in the country, and most of them do an outstanding job every day. And we have three layers of government: state, federal, and local. And all in all, when you pull back, it's difficult right now with some of the news that we see the last couple of weeks. Very painful news stories. But when you pull back and you go, you know what? We're still going to get through this. But things have to change. There's no question about that.
Sax, we're always looking for points of light here on Justice Matters while always acknowledging the darkness in which we are living. And I couldn't agree with you more. I want to talk a little bit about the courts because I'm glad you said, look, the courts are holding. I wouldn't mind taking on the Supreme Court a little bit on the courts front. But same question to you, Denver. I mean, where do you see us as a country, as a government, as a two-party system?
Where I came from, Glenn, was really radicalism, right? When you're looking at Islamic fundamentalism, especially between 99 and 2002, that's where I really cut my teeth as an Air Force intelligence officer. And, and even in Eastern Europe, right? I was in the Romanian-Serbian border in Eastern Europe and looked at the disinformation, right? And sort of the bizarre sort of proclamations from Serbia into Kosovo. And I was looking at all this stuff as an intelligence officer there as we were tracking Russians. Went to the Middle East in 2000, and then in 2001, when 9/11 hit, I did mission plan our teams the first bombing runs to Afghanistan. But when they sent me to NSA in 2002, I got to be on the ground floor for looking at radicalism in country in the U.S., but also globally, and to see how they were doing it. And the videos got slicker and slicker in the way that they did propaganda. And what I look at the two-party system right now, and because I was on the J6 committee, but I'm looking at this sort of these fringe elements of the parties that are pushing conspiratorial notions and fantasy over any type of facts or science-based policy. And I think I'm looking at a two-party system that's so fundamentally broken, based at the people that are serving seem that they actually would rather be hyperbolic, conspiratorial, or go to the least common denominator instead of serving their constituents. And as you know, with the Republican Party, what happened to me, I officiated a same-sex wedding and was immediately called the tool of the Antichrist. And I take pride that QAnon was the first to attack me, right? The really the conspiracy sticky bomb of QAnon, that somehow I was George Soros funded and probably hung out with Hillary at Comet Ping Pong Pizza. right? And so I actually got accused of that too. And my wife was called the spawn of Satan, Cleanse. So if I'm the tool of the Antichrist, she's a spawn of Satan. We're the most powerful couple in the world, you know? So anyhow, that's what happened to me. So for me, my fear for this country is policy being based on things that cannot be proven, on conspiracies, and you're seeing that right now. Even with the three-party system, it does bother me. I mean, with the separation of powers. Gosh, that was a Freudian thing. Sorry about that, Chris. But God dang, what's going on here? But even with that, I am very, very fearful that we've lost our way and that superstition has overcome facts and science.
Yeah, and you being both a tech guy and somebody who understands disinformation, the dangers of disinformation, where it's coming from, how we're under attack. Do you have any idea, any sense of how we can put the disinformation, the propaganda genie back into the bottle? Is there? I can't come up with anything, and I'm wondering if somebody who's an expert in that field has any thoughts about that.
There's some great studies like American University, Cynthia Miller Idris, talking about pre-bunking before they're all the way sort of ensconced or saturated with these conspiracy theories. That's very difficult to do. And I'd love to hear Chris on this. What I found is that it's very difficult based on this two-party system or the tribalist system to bust through with facts or data in any broad way. It's almost a house-to-house fight. I think that's where we're at, Glenn. I think you have to confront disinformation and fantasy as soon as it hits you now. I called it compassionate confrontation, but I think we're beyond that. I think you have to be very directed in your attack vectors towards people that are spreading BS. And I think that's what's so exciting, you know, in meeting Chris and talking to you and seeing what you do on Justice Matters, is that how do you, you know, Hunter S. Thompson said it best, Glenn. How do you become the million-pound shit hammer of facts, right? How do you utilize facts in a way that's very incisive in surgical strikes? And that's very, very difficult in a broad way. I think it's almost a one-on-one thing. I don't think there's any overarching way to fix some of those conspiratorial thinking and some of those theories that have completely saturated and metastasized throughout the United States.
And given that Denver has already foreshadowed it a couple of times by talking about the two-party system, you know, Sax, part of the reason I really wanted to jump on with both of you today is because, you know, you were talking about the challenges of the two-party system. And let's face it, the two-party system has brought us to where we are today at this moment in time in America. Let me tell you, everything ain't coming up roses. So I would you know, some people start to bristle and they're scared to have a debate beyond the two-party system. I think that's irresponsible. I think if we don't talk about other alternatives and whether they're viable, they're practical, we're doing ourselves and our country a disservice. So what are your thoughts about where we are, you know, in the two-party system in America today?
Well, the two-party system, Glenn, is the most protectionist racket in America today. They guard access to the ballot through their own systems. It's in some similar instances. Here's an example in Virginia. If you want to run for president and qualify for the ballot, it's 5,000 signatures. If you want to run for statewide office, however, it's 10,000 signatures. That's ridiculous. And no labels tried to put someone on the ballot last time in 2024. And the most difficult thing they faced was ballot access, just getting someone under to have a free market choice in the conversation. And you mentioned that I was a history teacher. When I started teaching history, it was the year of 1992, and Ross Perot ran as a third-party independent, not even third party, just an independent candidate. He was leading in the middle of the summer. And what I saw, Glenn, in Denver after that and witnessed, and I wasn't really involved in politics then, to a degree I was, in local committee meetings, that kind of thing. Both political parties had to adjust their sails to the reality that Ross Perot came in and said, debt, deficit, and trade. And what are we talking about today? Debt, deficit, and trade, for the most part. Our monetary policies, our fiscal policies, our trade policies is not much change, but you have to have a recalibration from time to time, usually every 24 years or so. And I think we're well past that. I was thinking maybe in 2020 Howard Schultz would do that, but you have to have a recalibration so that the two political parties don't take for granted their own voters and force you into a false choice of like, you can't vote for them. They're the really bad people. You can't vote for these people. You can't vote third party. You're going to ruin our chances. Well, I mean, because if you get these two competing versions of themselves, they're so they keep lowering the bar. And at some point, you kind of go, we can do better than this. I think we have the technology, the money, the people, the talent to offer to the American public something unique and different. And it's long overdue. And I hope we can start that process here.
All right, so Denver, let me throw it back to you. More concretely now, if we focus in on the structure, two parties, what's your view about where we are, how it's working or not working, and where do you think we should or could be going?
Chris talked about ballot access, right, and how difficult that is, and I've been through it. I think what's interesting, if you've never been in Congress and you go to Congress, and Chris will know this intimately based on his time in the legislature, you realize how much the parties control based on if they have the majority, Glenn. And I don't know if people know this, just being on the Financial Services Committee, I owe $255,000 a year to the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, just to keep that committee seat. The other thing, too, is that you have to constantly raise money in order to get stronger and stronger in the committee system, but the majority totally rules on the House floor. And it's so funny. People are like, well, why aren't the Democrats doing something? Or why aren't the Republicans doing anything? And I just start to laugh because some of the rules that they make up, they will be fluid in their rules, Glenn, and change them in midstream. I don't think the American people realize how little influence they have on what happens in Congress because of the transactional nature of it and how money is spent in Congress. So if you go in as an independent into Congress right now, you'd have a very difficult time trying to caucus. And everybody's like, you have to pick some place to caucus. Now there is a way around that, and I can go into that. But when you see the power of the two-party system, and now when you see those who are populating the two-party system, who's attracted to it, you start to see how corrupt it is. And that Americans really don't have a whole lot of sway in Congress unless their representative is very, very wealthy, is in a very safe district, which we can get into gerrymandering. So if you look at those that are actually the heads of the parties, they're in D plus 20 or R plus 20 districts, Glenn. And you get to the point that you realize the fundamental futility of trying to break into that system if you're coming in as a backbencher, if you're in a swing district, if you're not a huge fundraiser. It's very difficult to actually do anything for your constituency. And then you got to play the game, which means really you have to get your government knee pads and do everything you can to actually ingratiate yourself with leadership. And I think that's the issue that you have. The American people need to know. That's why we're at a point, the two-party system got us here, but we're at a point where we need a third way, or we need the ability, as Chris said, to recalibrate the United States and where we're going.
All right, Sax, talk about proposed solutions.
One, I think we need to have elections that require majority outcomes. We have too many people in the legislatures that win, or in governor's races, Senate races, that win by plurality. And they don't go to the legislature with a concrete mandate of governance. If you win with 35% of the vote, really, what are we talking about here? And a lot of it is called first past the post. And we need to get to a system that incentivizes candidates to have, because we should have majority rule with minority rights, but plurality rule, it doesn't going to work if you have plurality winners and majority rule. It doesn't really vibe for me. And I think we should have some election reforms. I think ranked choice voting is one of those that in the nomination phase particularly can be a useful tool. But by and large, we need a consistent third option in elections. We should not have this race to the bottom every election season, every 4 years for the president. It's like, okay, we're going to elect this person because the other team's person is so awful. We're going to do everything that is terrible or we don't even agree with anymore. I did an AI search between the Democrats in the 1990s and Republicans today, and they're pretty much spot on. There's been a tremendous change in the Republican Party, but there was no internal debate. We didn't say, oh, let's talk about foreign trade. It was up to Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone. And everyone said, okay, that's what we're going to do. And there was no debate. There was no consensus. So everyone's sort of forced in these positions that they fundamentally don't believe in. Conservatives like myself go, seriously? I don't believe in any of this. but I have to go along with it because Biden and Harris are worse. That's not an argument. That's an outcome. But so I think we do need to have a third party system, not a third party, just an off ramp from this surreal situation we have. And I've been working on a concept for the last 8 years or so, but it's time to push it out there and see if the market will bite. I'm almost 60. I'm a grandfather, early stage, very low risk prostate cancer. So I'm ready to take some shots downfield.
So thank you for sharing that personal information, and we wish you the best, obviously. So let's get down to brass tacks. What would it look like, and how? Listen, again, I am not a political guy, but I can already envision people saying all you're going to do is drain support away from one candidate or another. So you may be a spoiler, but can you actually do any good?
What do you,
You know,
what,
is
how do you spoil a garbage pit, a running dumpster fire like that's the House of Representatives in Congress? How do you spoil a spoil? I don't get that. I think what people yeah, will it change the outcome in some elections to the disfavor of one of the ruling parties? Okay, so what? What would be so bad about members of a different party in the Congress having to going, I don't think so, guys. It's 50-50 around here. It means my vote matters a heck of a lot more. If it's 217, and one, that one guy has got a lot of power. Right, Denver?
Oh, very much, and it's very hard to give herpes, It's very that's a very difficult thing to do, and so when you're talking about being a spoiler, there's another thing, Glenn, and Chris knows this too, is that a lot of people who bow up and say, "My God, if you run Denver as an independent or as another party, you're gonna throw it to MAGA." And I've gotten, "If you run, you're gonna throw it to the libs." And I think a lot of those people are financially invested in the system. I think some of the loudest people out there get paid to be as tribal and partisan as possible, especially the consulting class and things like that. So there's a money driven element here for a lot of the people that are pushing back. Obviously, there's ideology. Obviously, there's tribalism, and there's some very deep moral belief systems. You have the true believers on each side, but for the most part, it's transactional. And I think that's why when Chris brought me this concept, and let's be honest, it was Chris, calling me. I think he needed somebody who didn't care if they got their face smashed. Right? He's been in enough bar fights, but I think that it's one of the most brilliant things I've heard. And when me and Chris and when Chris was talking about other people and going back and forth on policy, I think some of the ideas and some of the stuff that I believe in inherently really gets encapsulated in a third way that can it's not centrist. And that's the other thing too. People say, "Oh, it's just like another moderate party." This is not moderate.
No.
This is using facts, data, and policy as that sledgehammer, to try to force the parties into a more, not just a more moderate stance, but a more practical stance based on data-driven policy rather than fantasy or fiction-based. And I think that's why it was so great, that Chris would call me and talk to me about this.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily we're in a left-right spectrum like we used to be, because the parties have changed their positions on so many issues over the years. It's not like, we grew up in the era of left wing, right wing. The issues just keep melding and moving around. I mean, the Democrats are now free traders and Republicans are protectionists. I mean, how do you put that on the How do you put that on the political spectrum anymore? We're
Well, so then let me ask you, Sachs, what do you envision sort of the defining principles of a third party to be? And I know you said you've been working on this 8 years, so tell us a little bit more about your vision for it.
Well, Chris. First and foremost, it can't be the world according to Sachs. That'd be bad.
We got to start somewhere.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I think first and foremost, we have to develop uh, an arena of debate on the ideas that are central to today. So much of our political structure today, Glenn, as you remember, the two-party system did work very well when we were up against Soviet Union for decades, generations. It served us well because we had one uniting feature. We weren't going to let the communists take over the rest of the world. That was the outgrowth of World War II. Growing out of that, I don't think that construct works anymore, and we've gotten used to it. It's become it's metastasized. It's corrupt, endemically corrupt on both sides of the aisle. And not to point out that any that particular people are, but just the system itself has gotten so dreadful. It's not producing results the American people deserve and need. We're $37 trillion in debt, and no one wants to talk about entitlements. Hello? How do you not talk about entitlements with $37 trillion debt? We all have grandkids here. How can we honestly look at our kids in the face in Christmas and go, "Hey, here are the presents, but you're still screwed"? You have to have an off ramp for this stuff.
So yeah, so let me ask you, I'm interested in how you think the prospects of a third party have changed when you talk about looking at entitlements. you know, let's look at where we are in the age of Trump and look at the bill that was just passed and look at the abject recklessness of the funding that's going into ICE and into deportation, which frankly is a lose, lose, lose proposition for people, for the economy, for the country, in my opinion. And I've never been a political guy, but I will say, I love to hear you say, we used to have, frankly, a united enemy that we were fighting against, the Soviet Union. As a young man, I voted for Ronald Reagan. I voted for George H.W. Bush. As an older man, and I'm going to throw in wiser to the extent I am wiser at all, I voted for Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. My views and priorities have changed. But entitlements, yes, but it seems like all rules of convention, including for government funding, at this moment are dead.
Well, I don't want to get lost in particular policies because that can be damaging to getting out of the gate. But the problem is, Glenn, in Denver, we're not having the debates. We have one big beautiful bill as an example. There's good and bad in every large piece of legislation. The problem is there's been no national consensus on what direction we want to go in these major policy areas. It was all shoved into one big beautiful bill because that's the reconciliation process in the Congress right now. Well, that's hogwash. That's hogwash. We should have what we have in Virginia, the single object rule. You debate one thing and one thing only, and that's it. And we're going to vote on it, and we're not going to be afraid. And you have to break those fundamental rules by which legislation is brought to the floor and have an honest, open, free debate, so the American public can see it on the House floor and go, "My God, this is the way it's supposed to be. Let's debate. Let's debate."
When you say you can't be afraid, you know what? Courage is in short supply in the current Congress. And Denver, you were in Congress not too long ago. What was your view of whether people were willing to stand up and do what's right, maybe at the risk of losing, a reelection, about, having the courage to do what's right for your constituents and for the country?
I was elected in a blue wave as a Republican, and it was so divisive. And I remember my first bill, which was interesting, that I had to vote on was reopening the government, Glenn. And Chris knows these stories. I remember there was a member of Congress, Glenn, and I want people to know this. He came up to me, and I had already voted yes to reopen the government. And he came up to me, put his hand on his shoulder, a fellow Republican. He goes, "Well, why did you vote so fast?" I said, "What do you mean?" And I know Chris laughs when I tell these stories. I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, the bill's good for your district, right? Because the 5th district." I said, "Well, absolutely. I was getting besieged, and I know that the far right told me to vote no, no matter what." I said, "But they need to pound sand right now because we have such a robust need for federal funds in the 5th district of Virginia." I don't know if people realized my district went from Fauquier County, right, all the way down to the North Carolina border, the DC suburbs, all the way to Virginia. So huge district, 10,000 square miles. So he goes, "Well, Denver, there's the first thing about politics here. He knows, the bill helps my district too." True story. And this is why I want people to understand why I get so frustrated. He goes, "You look, we just went over 218. I'm going to vote no." I'm like, "What?" And I remember the feeling that I had at that time were two. Number one, I felt validated that maybe I was a good human. And number two, I felt stupid as hell as far as politics. And then I'm thinking, why do I feel so stupid when I did the right thing no matter what for my constituency? And it happened on my First Amendment for rural broadband with Abigail Spanberg. I got absolutely ripped over the coals for doing any deal with a Democrat. And I think what people need to understand and why it's so attractive to me not to have a letter behind my name unless I choose it based on the way that we want to go in some way to be disruptive in a way that's productive. I think that people need to understand that Congress is completely transactional. And when I was there, I tried to play ball the first year, Glenn. They're like, "Denver, if you vote down the line with the party, we're going to allow you independence." Think about that statement. We're going to allow you to be independent. And I just
It's a little oxymoronic to me.
it's a little oxymoronic. And this is a guy who's a CEO. I already have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, Glenn, little. And after a year, and after I officiated the gay wedding, it was a complete debacle.
Yeah.
And I think what it came down to is I refused to swim in the same current. I thought I was smart enough to swim in my own current, and I wasn't, because the party system is so powerful, it controls so many monies, it controls your future, that it becomes almost impossible to do always what's right for your constituency without crossing a boundary where you get attacked, especially when people are mouth breathing and paranoid and crazy.
You bring up an interesting point here, and it's salient to the conversation. Less than 10%, less than 10% of the legislature in the federal level, and in Virginia, it's probably 10% too, or swing seats are open for debate. Really, the election is determined by the nomination, and that's in both parties, and that feeds the corruption. That they don't have to look at their entire constituency; they only look at that sliver of their own party that gets them renominated, and that's what Denver ran into. Yeah, and that's why he got voted out.
And Chris said something about the specific bills, and this is why me and Chris have talked so much. When you're voting on amendment packages, Glenn, it's not just people don't understand. It's not just the massive bill itself, but when amendments are introduced through committee or on the floor, if you're voting for amendment packages, those are a bundle, and I'm trying to be very simple here. Those are a bundle of amendments where 6 amendments you might agree with and 2 you don't, but you've got to choose. You got to choose how you're voting based on your rack and stack of the priorities of those amendments, and some of them suck. And you know that one of those amendments or one of those lines that have been slipped in there is going to be used by the opposition to tell you and your own party that you suck, right? Regardless of what you're doing on the other bills that you're voting for. And that's what is happening in Congress every day.
Corruption doesn't necessarily mean pay for play, and I think that still goes on in politics, and we're not immune to that. But corruption also means rot. In the system is just rotting from within because it is a self-serving protectionist racket that doesn't respond to the market. And this is what the free market principles, when they are applied, do for product and services and the people within the market itself. And it's just time to have different options for people to go to the polls and go, you know what, these two guys don't get it, and I'm gonna like right here right now. We have 3. Pick one. Take your pick. We all have different politics, and that's brilliant about America. We're allowed to. We should debate these things. But I want to create an atmosphere where people can come and open up the debate, and then let the group decide how we're going to march forward, rather than being the world according to me, the world according to Denver or Glenn. I think the 3 of us could get along real well and serve up some good policies, and talk it through. But we're not in this country. It's so irrational and emotional, and it turns into this negative, visceral hatred of our own people, rather than saying we just fundamentally disagree, but let's have the debate on entitlements, foreign policy, trade, whatever it is. But we're not. We're just saying you people suck. No, you suck more. What is that? We can't have it. It's unsustainable. And all we keep doing is adding on to the bill to the grandkids, guys. All we keep doing is saying, well, the grandkids have to figure this one out. They have to figure it out. That's not moral. It's just not moral to do that to our grandkids, and I can't do it anymore.
So how do you put together a movement that has any hope of actually developing support for a third party? And here's the leading question. Any idea what you might call it?
First, I think we do. Well, let's get to the first part of the question. You do it one step at a time, and you don't do it for your own greater good. You do it for the greater good of all. And it can't be about me. It has to be about we, and you have to have the debate. And look, sometimes I'm going to get outvoted in the direction I want to go in. Okay, fine. But if people feel like they're being heard, they'll tell other people. Like, this is a place to go, and let's have the conversation, and a real conversation, and then decide, and let the chips fall where they may. We still have to your first question, Glenn, we have a great country. We have a great nation. We have a great system of government that's holding. Even in all of this turmoil, the rails are holding. Thank God for the courts. Thank God for the Supreme Court. They're going to make the final decision. And, to Trump's credit, he listens to them. He's going to challenge them again, but he keeps going back to that. So there's an adherence to the institution that I know you so strongly believe in and worked in for your entire career. And thank you for your service, for putting the bad guys away and bringing justice to not just Washington, D.C., but now your message to the rest of the country. But 8 years ago, I came up with this, and I went into a restaurant for breakfast with a guy who was doing some film work for my organization, and he goes, "Before you talk about anything, just tell me what else you're working on. What's your one big thing?" I was like, "Okay, here we go." I have an idea for a third party. He's like, okay. I said, it's called the Federalist Union, the big FU. He goes, he goes, stop everything you're doing and do only this. This is the greatest idea I've ever heard. I'm like, well, let's hold off a second because I don't want to be. I got to make sure we can get off the ground here. But that's essentially what it is. A Federalist Union, a union of people who can come together in a federalist system and debate the issues and forward them in the body politic and hopefully make some changes that need to be made in America and for the rest of the world. Because frankly, Glenn and Denver, you guys put on the uniform. Thank God for doing that. But we're the bulwark of freedom in the world. Human freedom starts in America, and we have to have that shining city on the hill. We have to have our people coming together and forwarding that vision for the rest of the world. We can't be mocked around the world for not getting our shit together, and it's time we do that.
And I will admit that the big FU resonates with the Jersey guy in me.
Well,
You couldn't have come up with a better or more provocative or more appropriate name.
Thank you.
yeah, it's not bad branding, and I would think. But when Chris and I, gosh, when did we start talking about this, Chris? A couple years ago, you brought it, and we said we got to.
I brought it to you. It's been look. This was 2017. I've been
Yeah, and then you
wow.
and I think I'm Chris is perfect for this. He's been around politics for a long time, but I think he needs to find somebody who really in their soul is an FU guy. And I've always thought of myself, Glenn, as one of the biggest FU guys around. So I'm pretty excited to be a part of this. And if I were to run again, I think I would run under the FU. I think that the FU party, I think would be a fantastic thing to do. But the thing is, when we talked about the policies that surround the FU, there's questions me and Chris go back and forth that were pretty brilliant. And even here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have ideas on what we can do with broadband connectivity, with energy policy, with healthcare. There's just so many things that you can do where you can push the parties to come into a sane place to discuss this. So, that's where I'm at with the FU.
And we can also endorse members of both parties. There's
Absolutely.
no reason why we shouldn't. If there are good people on both sides of the aisle who are doing it the right way, and there's plenty of them, and they also need to see light at the end of the tunnel. Like, my God, I'm going to be okay. People are going to come out and support me in my district. I can take a chance and do what I think is right. Work across the aisle, be bipartisan. My God, where did that one go? So yeah, it's not an exclusive. It's just an opportunity to change the dynamic and right the ship.
So let me ask you this, which I tend to ask in every interview, and people have good outside the box ideas that I don't come up with. The 4-word question that we're forever asking ourselves, given where we are today on the political landscape, what can we do? What can people do right now, concretely? Obviously, call your elected representatives, donate to a candidate of your choice, donate to a nonprofit that's doing good work. All of that we know, but from your perspectives, especially as people who are talking about, the need for a third party, what can we do to try to engage and move America forward?
I'll send you a link you can put in your social media feeds. But first and foremost, you have to decide and really decide. Everyone struggles with certain decisions in life, big ones, whether it's, just say eating and drinking behaviors. I want to do this in my life. I want to change that. You have to make the decision. And it's okay to make a decision here. This one's obvious. We cannot continue as a nation on our current trajectory. We are $37 trillion in debt with no way to pay it back. We are at each other's throats on a daily basis, and it's unsustainable. And if you want to change that, you have to fundamentally look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to make this change. I'm going to decide to do something different. I'm going to vote different. I'm going to behave differently. And then join us. Sign up, get involved, and we'll put together. It'll take some time, and we'll hire good people, but it's going to be important for the grandkids, and that's pretty much all I think about.
I think, Glenn, if I were to answer the question, nothing happens unless you do it. I know it's so ridiculous, but what I've seen is a lot of people like to talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk.
Right.
And you have to lean forward. Now, the thing I think that people say, well, Denver, there's a fine line between leaning forward and bending over, right? But I think what we have right now
It's wrong
is
with
that, well, is that we're leaning is that we're leaning forward in a way that, listen, Chris had this idea in 2017. He comes to somebody who's uniquely positioned. I think people like me. It's not just me, but I am uniquely positioned if I were to ever run again to do something that's a little bit crazy. And that crazy is bringing back reality. And I know that's ironic, but the insanity that we're talking about is how do you bring reality and facts back into the debate and the policy debate, where those that are completely transactional and corrupted based on rot and based on pay to play have to be brought back into a space where the constituents understand what they're saying and what they're doing. Because there's something like the FU that says, no, that is wrong. That's not exactly what this says. Here's the best way we can bridge the gap between these two sides. And my God, can you imagine if you had a party and a path that was that sort of reconciliator, that arbitrator between two sides that have gone completely nuts? It's a very compelling, very attractive notion to me.
So let me wrap up by asking, where can people find you? All of which I'll drop in the description of this video, all of the links. And is there any place they can go to learn more about this, the potential for a third party, FU or otherwise?
Well, I'll have the website too. Yeah, I think it's federalistunion.com, maybe .org. It's been reserved. We have that headed up. We're not in a party situation right now. We're starting off as a C4 just to get our legs underneath us. There's going to be a myriad of organizations if this thing goes well, but I'll send you a sign up link and people can. It'll be a simple Google form, and then people can sign up. We'll go from there. This is basically grassroots 101 stuff, Glenn. It's not. There's no slick promotional advertisement behind this thing. This is just American people caring about their country and the future of, frankly, democracy, freedom, the republic at large. It's go time. It's just go time. It's unsustainable. It's time to make the decision. We're going in a different direction. We're going to do things differently, and we hope to make both parties adjust their sails and find their best representative of themselves, like their best version. That's what I'm going to get to. Their best version. Remember that best version and bring it to the American public. That's the challenge I want. I don't want to harm the other two parties. I want to challenge them to get better. And that's what market forces do. So you have Coke and Pepsi right now. Why can't we be Dr. Pepper? Right? Ain't no problem with that.
Or bourbon.
What'd you say? Or bourbon? Says the distillery guy.
Yeah. I think if there's Coke and Pepsi, we need to be bourbon.
Well, we'll have a whiskey rebellion caucus for Denver.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. They could and people can find you both on Substack. Again, I'll drop all the links into the description of this video. Thank you for thinking about how we can do better, how we can repair what I think we all acknowledge is broken.
Yeah.
And somebody said, if you have a garbage dump, is setting it on fire all that detrimental to what we're experiencing? And there are some who say, people are looking to burn everything down now anyway. So, it's good to think about, okay, well, what can we build up from the ashes? Mm-hmm. So I appreciate both of your voices in this. You guys know politics. I don't, but I've learned a little something and you've given me food for thought. Thank you both for jumping on today, joining us here on Justice Matters 2-on-1, I guess we have to call it. And I hope to see both of you guys again soon.